Welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, everybody's talking green jobs, but a major solar production facility is closing in Maryland and moving to Asia. We asked the Washington Post's Steven Mufson, is this a trend? He's best remembered as a fat, cigar-chomping NFL owner, but often forgotten. Art Rooney was a sports renaissance man. We chat with two of his biographers, Rob Ruck and Maggie Patterson. Also, we revisit a celebration of the Free Minds Book Club for young men in the D.C. Adult Corrections System. Tom Bloc drops by to preview Amnesty International's first ever Human Rights Arts Festival in Silver Spring, Maryland. Singer-songwriter Lynn Hollyfield is with us, and we've got poetry by Brian Gilmore.
They are telling my mother she married Karl Marx or Engels. This is the source of her chuckling. My father, Vladimir Lenin. My father, author of the Communist Manifesto. My mother must have typed it, disseminated copies to the workers of the world. Today, she would have emailed it as an attachment.
On the Coffee House.
Welcome to 21st Century Life at the Coffee House. The Obama administration has already made good on promises to invest billions of dollars in the so-called green economy. Tax rebates for hybrid cars and home weatherization now abound. But not all the news is good. Last month, BP Global, formerly known as British Petroleum, announced it's closing its vaunted solar panel manufacturing plant near Washington, D.C., laying off 320 workers and moving the operation to China and India. Here to discuss the future of green energy in the U.S. is Steve Mufson. He's a veteran print reporter who covers energy issues for the Washington Post. Welcome, Steve, to the Coffee House.
Glad to be here, Mike.
You know, we hear so much about green jobs and the green economy from the president on down, but for people who don't quite know, what exactly is a green job?
Well, there are a lot of different kinds of green jobs, of course. I mean, some of them are very high-tech, involving working with materials that you might use on a solar photovoltaic panel and trying to come up with a better material for that. And some of them are very mundane jobs. They're like the old steel industry jobs, welding things for wind turbines, and they could be even lower tech, involving caulking windows and stuff like that. So, you know, we've kind of lumped a huge number of different activities into this category.
So if the job sort of results in lowered pollution or harm to the environment and brings some benefits, it can be called a green job, a wide range of them. But you know, we all get that making solar panels is obviously a green activity,
right.
And here's British Petroleum announcing that they're closing this plant outside of D.C. 3 years ago, they announced a $70 million expansion of this solar panel plant, and now they're closing it and literally tearing it down, the building, and moving to China. Are we losing the United States? Are we losing the competition for green jobs?
Well, it's not clear whether we're losing it, but there is a competition, and we are losing some things, and we're gaining some things too, because at the same time, there's a Chinese company looking at setting up a plant here, and a German and a Korean company and Japanese company. So there are jobs flowing both ways, but a lot of them are flowing to China, needless to say.
So we have this manufacturing plant right outside of D.C., 300-something jobs and solar panels moving to China at the same time that a Chinese solar company is moving to the United States?
Right. Well, you know, every company calculates things differently, and perhaps, you know, to some extent, this is a failing of BP's strategy here. I think that's a possibility. The plant it has in China is a joint venture. The plant it has in India is a joint venture. So to some extent, BP's de-emphasizing its manufacturing, wholly owned manufacturing operations. And some companies want to be here because a lot of people believe that the big expansion solar market is going to be in the United States next. You know, we've seen a lot of solar expansion in Germany and in Spain, where they have very generous government subsidies for people who put in solar. And I think people are anticipating a new wave of solar market growth here in the United States as people try to meet state renewable portfolio standards and things like that.
So you mentioned the states. You know, a lot of people point to the United States and say, well, you know, you never signed Kyoto as a nation. You're not
Right.
engaged internationally. But a lot of foreigners don't understand that we have these 50 different states who can experiment. Many of them are moving pretty far in renewable energy with these renewable portfolio standards, just a fancy word for mandating clean electricity. This is a factor in green jobs?
Yes, very much so, because the way as you know, the way these portfolio standards work is that utilities must convert a certain amount of their power generation to renewable sources by a certain date, and this varies from state to state, but there are 26 states that have these standards, and they're going to be very challenging for utilities to meet, especially in the next 10 years.
Now, there's also been, you know, a lot of talk about the fact that the Obama administration is emphasizing green jobs, and part of the stimulus package, I mean, $70 to $80 billion was related in some way to alternative energy. But at the same time, the Obama administration last month opened up new areas of the United States coastline to offshore drilling. Isn't that a contradiction?
Well, a little bit, but not entirely, because even if they're very successful in renewable energy stimulation, we're still going to need more oil and gas to keep the economy going. You know, I think people sometimes don't realize just how ravenous our energy appetite is. We consume a staggering amount of energy. And as long as we're going to do that, we're going to need a lot of different kinds of supply. Offshore oil, of course, won't solve it either, because that's just, you know, in the grand scheme of things, the reserves that are out there are relatively modest. But generally, the United States is getting more and more of its oil from offshore as we deplete some of our onshore reservoirs, so that now more than a quarter, I think, or so of our oil production is from the Gulf of Mexico.
But still, I mean, if Virginia has been particularly vocal as a state in demanding the opportunity to drill offshore, Virginia's estimated, you know, recoverable oil offshore is equal to about 6 days worth of U.S. supply. I mean, this really is meaningless, isn't it?
Well, I think some people look at it that way. I mean, of course, you're not, you know, no field is providing all of U.S. supplies. So in fact, you know, you'll develop the field, it will produce a modest amount over a period of 10 or 20 years. But that won't start for 10 years because developing these things take a long time. And the other thing is that we don't really know what's out there. There's been no seismic work done out there for 20 or 30 years because no one thought they'd be able to drill. But last time people drilled off the East Coast in New Jersey, they came up with a lot of dry holes, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of offshore, Virginia is also, the governor of Virginia, a Republican, has been demanding, you know, been making the cry, drill, baby, drill, but he's also been saying we want to develop offshore wind farms, which is great, but the number one commercial wind, utility scale wind turbines sold in the United States actually come from Denmark. Again, we get back to this globalization issue. Is America set up to really get the jobs? Because that's what the economy is lacking when we're importing wind turbines from Denmark.
Well, you know, I think each country will do what it's best at, relatively speaking. And so, you know, there are American wind turbines that are exported to other countries as well. Vestas from Denmark is one of the leading companies, and, you know, it's likely it would get a lot of that work. Some of the jobs are going to be here anyway because you need Americans to help erect the thing and repair the thing and maintain the thing. So that was one of the points that BP made when it closed its plant. It said, well, 70% of the jobs will still be here and only 30% of the manufacturing jobs.
But the people right outside of D.C. in the town of Frederick, Maryland, where this BP solar plant was, I mean, they're out of work. I'm wondering what specific policies might the U.S. government pass or promote that could do the best job possible in creating and keeping green jobs, like making solar panels here and not having us buy them overseas. Is it possible in a global marketplace like this?
Well, you know, you can't guarantee it. And I mean, I think...
Do we want to guarantee it? Is that good for our economy?
Well, no. I mean, yeah, what's good for the economy is for us to do what we do best and for other countries to do what they do best. Yeah, right. Spend. No, I mean, I think there are some things that we do. We tend to forget that we do export a lot of goods. But I think that when it comes to renewable energy, any policy that's going to promote the use of renewable energy will have a positive impact on jobs here. I guess also to some extent in the case of China, if we pursue a policy that helps encourage or even compel China to revalue its currencies so that the United States is more competitive, that might help also.
Well, let's talk about federal policy. So President Obama ran for president saying that climate change he believed was a big problem, and that climate change and clean energy were the top of his list to things that get done, along with health insurance and some other issues. There's talk of the House of Representatives passed a capping carbon bill last June. Where are we in the Senate following through and that actually becoming law?
Well, I've always been a little bit on the pessimistic side because this is a very difficult bill to pass. There are a lot of different interest groups. It can be very complicated the more you try to make concessions to bring different lawmakers on board. But, the House passed its bill last year. It looks like that's going to be largely, radically modified. And there are, as you know, 3 senators working most on this. Senators John Kerry, Lindsey Graham, and Joe Lieberman. And it seems likely that they will introduce or at least unveil some sort of bill later this month. Whether or not it actually goes to the floor, whether it can win 60 votes it needs to come to a vote, that's going to be very challenging. And it's not clear to me that they're there, but we'll see when they come up with the proposal later.
Getting 60 votes on a climate bill, I know we had a cold winter on the East Coast, and amazingly that seems to affect the debate. But if there's going to be movement on this, will we see it soon, or could this be later in the year? What's your sense of timing on a possible climate bill?
The timing's tough because the Senate's going to do financial reform first. That's yet another bill like healthcare and climate that has a lot of big money interests, a lot of entrenched interests. So that bill could take some time. Then they need to do the budget. There'll be some judicial nominations. Everyone's going to want to get out of town to, campaign for re-election. So it's going to be very tough to get this on the calendar for this year. But, the president says he's determined, and these senators say they're determined. We'll see, but I think it's going to be difficult.
Well, let's go back to the issue of green jobs. You've said that more than offshore oil, what could sort of be a competitor with stimulating green jobs is this whole issue of shale gas, this huge discoveries of natural gas in the eastern United States. Explain.
Well, shale gas is gas that's trapped in shale rock about a mile below the surface. And we've known it's there, but it's never seemed economical to get it out. Now people have figured out and refined some techniques that have been around for maybe the last 10 or 20 years. And suddenly you can get this stuff fairly cheap. And it's very plentiful. There's a huge formation underneath West Virginia, parts of Maryland, a huge part of Pennsylvania and New York, which is particularly big, but there are other ones elsewhere. And it's connected to the whole energy and climate debate because, now if in fact this gas is, we know it's plentiful, but if we can extract it in ways that are pass environmental muster, because there are some environmental issues, but if those issues can be overcome, that could change the outlook a lot because natural gas emits fewer greenhouse gases than coal or oil, and perhaps we could substitute gas for coal in some of the power plants that we have now. So that's a factor. In legislation, it's an issue because there were a lot of concessions made to coal interests in the House version of the climate bill, and now in the Senate, the natural gas interests are fighting back and trying to get better treatment for themselves.
So kind of a mixed blessing. I mean, all this natural gas has been discovered has half the greenhouse gas emissions of coal, for example.
Oh.
And I'm going to wrap up here, but it might extend our addiction to fossil fuels for a while.
It could also supplement our renewable sources, when downtimes.
Provide part of the bridge to the clean energy future. Well, a big thanks to Steve Mufson of the Washington Post. Clearly, clean energy investments and jobs will continue to grow in America. but how fast and how much depends on state and federal policies clearly, as well as global market forces. What's certain is that change is certainly in the air. I'm Mike Tidwell, and this has been 21st Century Life.
My mother laughing at government men. My father has taken a new job. With folders and documents, they are telling my mother she married Karl Marx or Engels. This is the source of her chuckling. My father, Vladimir Lenin. My father, author of the Communist Manifesto. My mother must have typed it, disseminated copies to the workers of the world. Today, she would have emailed it as an attachment. But this is 1955, comrade, and my father's whole family is trying to laugh about it too. They are Paul Robeson, Du Bois, Langston Hughes, or Dashiell Hamlet insisting upon handcuffs rather than a microphone. Is your father Karl Marx? They ask all of them. How do you spell proletariat? What brand of cigarettes did Lenin smoke? You mean he smoked? I hear he quit cold turkey before he died. And Karl Marx, well, comrade, didn't he play for the Brooklyn Dodgers or something? This is not funny. We know about your father, a union man, Baltimore, Maryland, tried to organize a few things, get people to band together in the workplace, like ants when they see a cracker fall. He reads the people's daily world. Your father's a bowler, right? Formed a team and some of you were members. And at the bowling alleys you didn't keep score, you just said, nice shot, comrade. My father's sisters and brothers no longer laugh. Two of my aunts almost lost their jobs because they could bowl. My father got interrogated for days because he knew how to pick up a spare. And my uncle, a clever man on the lanes, he spent his 2-year stint in the Army in a Kansas mess hall being spied upon like he was KGB. They gave my father the documents, the records, the job. He died with those secrets. My father always liked to bowl. Kicked his leg out like Earl Anthony on ABC's Wide World of Sports on Saturday afternoons. My mother liked to bowl too. She had a purple ball and ate the cheap French fries with all that magnificent Heinz ketchup dripping slow. She couldn't stop chuckling at the government men that day. Lenin, unions, October revolutions, it is all a bit too serious. And Karl Marx, my mother says, I'm sure he never ever played baseball.
Welcome to Writer's Block at the Coffee House. American football is a very different game today than when it emerged in the late 19th century as a stepchild of rugby. Not only the shape of the ball has changed, so too has the culture of the sport. And no single individual better reflects the history and transformation of the sport than Art Rooney, the founder and owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Art Rooney was born in 1901 and died in 1988. He is the subject of a just-released biography over 10 years in the making. With me to discuss Rooney, A Sporting Life, are two of its authors, University of Pittsburgh historian Rob Ruck and Duquesne University journalism faculty member Maggie Patterson. Sadly, their co-author, Mike Weber, passed away in 2001. I spoke with Rob Ruck and Maggie Patterson via Skype at their home in Pittsburgh and asked, what makes Art Rooney worthy of a major biography?
I think that Art Rooney personified the evolution of American sport from the sandlots to corporate boardrooms. All along, representing, I think, what's best about American sport. That sense of camaraderie, the way in which people use sport to tell a story about who they are. And Rooney, who was a son of the Sandlots and an all-around athlete of some distinction in Pittsburgh in the early 20th century, really is at the core of making the NFL the most popular and rationally run sport in American league history. And he's at the core of Pittsburgh adopted sport as his story that he tells the world.
Maggie, to better understand this iconic figure, you actually began your research in Ireland, Art's ancestral homeland. Why did you do that?
Well, we wanted to trace the Rooney family history because it's the story of iron and steel, and it's so tied to the story of Pittsburgh and to the story of immigration into America. And we found his family's roots in Northern Ireland, in Newry, just south of Belfast. We found his great-great-grandfather, James, in books there. They came from Newry to Montreal, where many of the Irish died. That was during the potato famine, died on the way over. And he worked and became a skilled iron worker in Montreal in the factories there. They went back to Wales, where iron production was at its peak. And when the iron industry turned to steel in Wales, they came to the United States, first to Youngstown and then to Pittsburgh.
So the Rooneys ultimately settled on the north side of Pittsburgh, running saloons and boarding houses. Young Art proved to be quite adept at sports, but that's not really how we remember him, is it?
The image that most sports fans across the nation have of Rooney is as a fairly rotund, older fellow with thick eyeglasses and a shock of white hair. But when he was young, he was probably the best all-around athlete in Pittsburgh. Right after World War I and into the 1920s. He wasn't the biggest guy, but he might have been one of the toughest. He was quick, and he was very heady, had a very think ahead of the play approach to the game. He was a center fielder and leadoff hitter in baseball, who when he was 15 would be called upon by semi-professional clubs if they were going to play one of the good Negro League clubs like the Homestead Grays or the Kansas City Monarchs. He was a tough boxer as a welterweight who beat both of the Americans who qualified for the 1920 Olympic Games in his weight class, including Sammy Mandel, who won. He probably would have made the team himself, but he didn't compete because he had played semi-pro baseball and didn't want to have happened to him what had happened to Jim Thorpe, who had to turn back some Olympic medals after winning it when it turned out he had played money professionally before. And of course in football, he not only was the quarterback or halfback for a bunch of different sandlot and semi-pro clubs as well as a couple of college teams, he organized clubs. He organized leagues, and he guided a sandlot club from the north side of Pittsburgh called the Hope Harveys all the way into the NFL in 1933.
But when it came to making money, Maggie, it wasn't his baseball, boxing, or football skills that set Art apart, was it?
He was a tremendously successful bettor of horses, and it was probably what he was best at. It's where he made his money to support the football team for many years, and he loved that world. He loved the tracks. He loved everything about it. I don't know of any other man that I've ever heard of who took his wife on their honeymoon for a tour of the racetracks in the United States and Mexico, with some of his racing buddies coming along for the ride. So he was really attached to that horse race world, and he made a lot of money at it.
Well, I think the track subsidized not only the team, but it was the primary source of income for the family. In the 30s and 40s and 50s, the Steelers lost a lot more money than they made. And, you know, as Art used to say, you had two thrills, trying to win on Sunday and meet payroll on Monday. And it was the racetrack, or promoting boxing, which he also did for a while, which I think allowed him to keep the club afloat for several decades when not only weren't they making money, they weren't winning very many ball games either.
Not exactly a sustainable business model, but ultimately the Steelers franchise became quite popular and lucrative, and the Steelers of the 1970s, the darling of the nation. How did that come about?
Probably the best thing he ever did was put his son Dan in charge of the team, because Dan had a head for business that Art never had, and he made the team extremely successful and hired Chuck Knoll, who began to pull the franchise together. And he also hired his son, Art Jr., to do recruiting, and he hired the Steel Curtain team and the team that became the champions in the 1970s.
The greatest miracle play in sports history had taken place. The catch was instantly dubbed the Immaculate Reception.
Well, maybe a bit of hyperbole there, but the Immaculate Reception is to this day atop everyone's NFL highlight reel. But what about the NFL? Rob, is today's league one that Art Rooney would feel at home in?
I think the NFL from the 30s on was predicated on the belief by the owners that they were all in it together, and that the only way to make it was to stick together, protect the weaker franchises by implementing a draft that allowed a team with the worst record to get the first crack at talent, by sharing broadcast revenues equally, even recognizing the union and trying to find ways to create win-win situations. Now, I think right now the NFL is in a crossroads. You have owners like Jones in Dallas, Snyder in Washington, who don't adhere to that one for all for one ethos. They'd like to be the New York Yankees. They'd like the NFL to be like Major League Baseball. And I think Art would have a hard time with that. I think he'd be counseling people not to try to make the most money, leave something on the table for somebody else, and try to develop more of a sense of trust with the players, which right now is lacking.
Rob Ruck, Maggie Patterson, co-authors of Rooney, A Sporting Life. Thanks for exploring this unique figure in American sports and culture and joining us from your home in Pittsburgh via Skype. I'm Mark Cohen, and this has been Writer's Block.
This event started when we invite guest authors and poets to come into the jail. We had a poet, Washington Wizards, Etan Thomas, who's unfortunately been traded now, but he came in and he read his own poetry, which we thought was great, and all of a sudden one of the kids said, "Can you read mine?" We never even thought about it. They read his, they were so excited, all of a sudden we were like, we gotta have a poetry reading. Of course, and we have to invite the community.
This is a poem I wrote since I came home when I was doing my internship with Free Minds. It's called The Streets Watch by Jermaine. You got your eyes on the corner thinking you see cops, but whole time you too blind cause really the streets watch. Every move you be making, thinking your peeps clocking, you ain't hip it on the rip, it's only the streets watching. Why? You was child and he raised you here. So the streets will keep you on the side till your days is near. The streets don't ever want to hear you say I made it through. He just wants you to have a seed so that he could raise them too. The streets will promise the girls clothes and money that you won't never see. He laughing, cause he think it's funny, you the dummy he know won't never leave. When you finally realize this ain't for you, dog, that's when the streets stop. But until then, you can't win, cause yeah, the streets watch. That's it.
Our program serves about 300 young men. And what we are is a nonprofit that works with teenaged boys at the DC jail who are charged and incarcerated as adults. So they're in the adult system for felony charges. We believe that books and writing can change lives. We do a book club, just like a regular book club where we choose books and we discuss. And it's all based on themes that our young men can relate to, about life on the streets and changing. And then we do creative writing, so we do poetry workshops. We then follow them as they're transferred to federal prison, where we send them books, continue to send them books, set them up with a pen pal, and work on their reentry when they come home. When they come home, they're in the reentry phase, and we help, number one, get back into school and jobs. So it's a whole circle.
How did it get like this? Things ain't been like this. Thinking it got like this once Bush got hit. They got wars with the money, but the poor still hungry. Man, I used to love this country, but this country's getting ugly. And why would I go to a fight for some country that shackle me up, shit me out, and sleep me on some concrete? Title 16 is the law that says when you're 16, you can be tried as an adult. I thought robbery is supposed to be a crime. They over there fighting this war, taking over from Afghanistan. Democrats, Republicans, man, that's for the ropey, man. What's good with my brothers in the hood that's been smuggled down? A donkey or an elephant has never been seen in the hood. Only rats, raccoons, and pit bulls in the hood. With roaches in the house, about a 3-room house, 8 folks in the house. Let's say 2 to a room plus the couple on the couch. And the fact you know the plumber, you won't even help them out. It's not the land of the free, we're the land of the false.
It's really the books. They read about somebody. If Nathan McCall can do it and makes me want to holler, they have a roadmap that they can do it. And that is the key, is the books and the reading about others who have done it, who've gone before, met these challenges and succeeded. And then the writing, the feelings, the emotions these kids go through in a violent prison, in families that have forgotten about them. Through writing, they can express their feelings of loneliness, anger, instead of resorting to the cliche of picking up a pen instead of a gun. It's really true.
And like we got guys who came home and got their GEDs while I was locked up in 07. I got my GED when I was 17. And I'm supposed to be going to college in January. And accepted so many freedom in life.
Most of the themes of the writing of our member center around certain themes of feeling lonely and not connected, and wanting to be connected to their moms, and feeling that they are a big disappointment and they want to prove to them that they can be a success. The feeling of not having a father, as you can imagine, most of our members have never had a father in their life, but they also, many have young children themselves, so they want to be a better parent to their kids than they had themselves.
This poem was written by me. It was dedicated to my daughter when I was locked up. So this for my daughter right here. Don't be like, I can't explain on how bad I feel inside. Waking up in the cell, sometimes daddy cry. And that don't make your father any less of a man. I love you with all my heart. And when you get older, you will understand that your dad made a lot of wrong choices. I think I'm going crazy because I keep hearing you and your mom's voices saying, baby, stay strong. Daddy, please don't be away long. It brings tears to my eye when I hear the pain of your mother's voice on the phone. It hurts me to know that I left y'all in the world alone. But I told your mother I'm ready to make a change. For my daughter, I'm a man up and turn my back on the street game. Plus, I must say your mother's strong for holding the fort down. I once was a boy, but daddy's a man now.
We don't know of anyone that's doing youth in the adult system exactly like ours, but we're spreading the word. It's spread to, we've done trainings in Baltimore, Maryland. We want to get the word out so everybody can use this method because it's very easy and it's very effective.
Welcome to the Artistic Eye at the Coffee House. Silver Spring, Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C., is host to the upcoming Amnesty International Human Rights Art Festival. The first of its kind, the festival will be held at numerous venues from April 23rd to 25th and feature visual art shows, new media events, performance arts, spoken word, theater, book readings, film, music, hands-on workshops. It's big, and it's all about raising awareness of human rights and justice issues. With me to preview the festival is the event organizer and noted visual artist, Tom Bloc. Tom, welcome to the Coffee House.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, so let's start with an overview of what's in this festival.
Well, we have more than 400 artists doing 200 different performances over about 50 hours. And these artists come from 50 different nations. And it's all for free. And it is all advocacy-oriented art. And it's in 40 different venues in Silver Spring. So
And
that's...
how did you come to, did you create this idea? Is this...
I did create this idea. I have a series of paintings called the Human Rights Painting Project, which I've undertaken with Amnesty International for close to 10 years, where I paint portraits of human rights defenders to raise awareness. And about a year ago, I had a big fundraiser event, and 2 days after that, Amnesty laid off a third of their national staff due to the recession. And so I said, basically, what can I do more? And I know there's a lot of advocacy artists out there, and I thought if I bring us all together, maybe that kind of energy can take this to another level in helping Amnesty and raising awareness of these issues.
Okay, so what do you mean by human rights when you talk about it?
I think in a general sense, it is just the right that everybody has to live free from any kind of oppression due to ethnic, religious, economic, or environmental reasons, and the right to practice their religion and to live their lives free of those kinds of pressures. And it sounds very basic, but Amnesty reports that in 150 countries in the world right now, people are under that kind of pressure. So it is something that is unfortunately harder to achieve than you might think.
And so how have you gone about building support for this festival?
Well, it's grassroots. We have no budget. It has been all volunteers, and really it's been fueled by the passion of the artists. The artists are passionate about using their art to transform the world. And so we got out there digitally very early with a website and a Facebook page, and word of mouth spread. There's never been anything like this under the Amnesty International banner. And so as word spread, more and more artists just approached me from around the country and around the world. We have artists self-funding their trips from Honduras, Finland, Austria, Germany, all over the United States.
And the program is chaired or at least nominally led by a famous TV producer, right?
Yes. We were fortunate enough through a series of happenstances, or some might say destiny, to reach Norman Lear via his son, Ben, who's a musician and will be appearing at the festival. And Ben was very impressed and he said, you want me to tell my dad about this, Norman? I said, let Norman know. And I got an email out of the blue, so
this is Norman Lear, All in the Family.
All in the Family, founder of People American Way.
Right.
And really
the whole genre of TV production programs
that
are
the
based
70s.
on social comedy.
Yes, and he did about 8 or 9, which many of us who grew up in the 70s heard of, One Day at a Time and the Jeffersons. And then he founded People for the American Way. He's very much of an activist. So he just emailed me and said, I really like what you're doing with the festival. And we emailed back and forth. And he offered to give us a little bit of money to commission some art by a spoken word artist named Steve Connell. And then I said, look, Norman, this is wonderful. Would you, well, I was calling him Mr. Lear, and he said, Norman to you, via email. That was quite nice. And then I said, would you be willing to take on a larger role? Your name would mean so much to raising awareness. And he said, sure, I'll do whatever you want. And he's offered to do some interviews. He has reached out to various people. He's made some phone calls on our behalf. He's just been a great presence. And not a hands-on day-to-day guy. He's a busy man,
But you are, and you're also a visual artist, and you're going to be joined by a number of other visual artists at the festival. Why don't you walk us through some of the artwork that's going to be in the festival, preview it with us now. Let's roll the tape.
This will give a good example of the kind of thing that we'll be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
That's my piece, Jacqueline Modena. I just put it up. It's a human rights lawyer from Chad, the first female human rights lawyer in Chadian history. And that painting was put up today in Pyramid Atlantic Arts Center on George Avenue. That's a mural actually that is outside of Kefa Cafe, and you can see this one. It's on a wall by an artist named Joel Bergner, and it has the stories of 3 different Maryland refugees in it. This is a work by a woman named Laura Elkins, and it concerns the state oppression and state overreach in terms of watching the citizenry. You can see our dollar bill Masonic eye there in the middle, keeping a watch on us. This is the Silk Road Dance Theater, and they do dances of Middle Eastern and Far Eastern countries where sometimes dance is considered illegal or not humble enough, and so they're revivifying this dance. This is a piece by Elsa Ghebreyesus, also just put up today in Pyramid Atlantic, and it concerns the Eritrean constitution and how it has not been followed and how the Eritrean government has cracked down on their newspaper and their print journalists there. This is a photograph by an Israeli artist named Vardit Goldner, and what she does is she goes into the Palestinian occupied territories and just documents the difficulties they have due to some of the Israeli policies. And again, she is an Israeli artist. This is a work by a man named Rob Gebhardt, and he is documenting the life of the Karen people on the Thai border. And this is a small oppressed group that really has no home between Thai, living right on the Thailand border. This is a woman named Lillian Bailey Hoover, and it talks about the mundane, unfortunately in our culture, the mundane aspect of war and the way it becomes almost a advertising event for our culture. And her work will be at Montgomery College. And then this is a piece by a local photographer named Linda Hesh, and she deals with a lot of oppressed people. You see one side said, we're homo, and the other side said, yes, we're hetero, sort of playing with the ideas of how we identify ourselves in culture. And this is a woman named Carla Lara who will be flying in from Honduras, and she's a resistance singer and a resistance activist. She went on a hunger strike after the coup in Honduras, and her music is so beautiful. The first time I heard it, I started to cry thinking about hearing her in person. This is a sculptor named John McDevitt, and he's concerning himself with violence against women issues and showing how the circle is broken within a family or within a culture by the disrespect that this shows. This is the work of a woman named Taryn Wells. She's multiracial, and she uses her work to question what it means to be multiracial, which is obviously especially relevant today with a president who is half white and half black and yet considered black because black blood is stronger, I guess.
That's the visual art, but there's a lot more that's
well,
going on.
there was a singer and some dance there.
From Honduras.
Yes, we have a whole theater festival with probably 25 different theater works. We have a film festival with 30 or so film. That'll be up in City Place Mall. We're opening a once closed AMC theater that's been closed since 2004, and for this festival weekend we're going to be running films there. We have dance. We have performance art. It's basically the complete range of human creative activity.
All right. I have to ask you this. You're an artist. Lots of other artists are coming in to do this event. It's to promote human rights. In reality, can artists have an impact in promoting human rights, or is this an exercise in the artists feeling better about themselves?
I'm glad you asked, because that is a very important question, and I'll answer that in a couple ways. First of all, by bringing the artists together, we are producing a much stronger energy, because if a single artist is doing advocacy art, their art kind of goes out there and dissipates. We will be generating a kind of press and a kind of audience that is very unusual, if not unprecedented, for advocacy artists. The other thing of great importance we're doing is we think in this culture that if there's enough money, then we can use the money to promote spiritual values. We're turning that on its ear. We are in a time of great economic pressures, and on zero budget, we are going to be creating, through the passion of this advocacy art, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 to $2 million in immediate economic impact in this little downtown area, showing how important this specific kind of art is and can be to the general culture. So we're not necessarily, I'm not saying we're going to solve the world problems, but people will come in and see things in a fresh light. They will be transformed and grow, and we will show the power of this kind of art to an economy, and what we judge things on in this culture is money, and therefore perhaps down the road we'll have an easier time producing advocacy-oriented art and advocacy-oriented festivals and garnering a much greater help of the community because they see dollar signs. And that's fine, because working towards spiritual health is vital, and any way we can make people realize how it can help the general culture is very important.
And what kind of penetration have you had among policymakers on Capitol Hill, for instance?
Well, we have a number of honorary committee members who have lent their name, and this is people like Senator Lugar, Senator Kerry, Senator Mikulski, Senator Cardin, saying that they feel this is important. In terms of lobbying and changing policy, I don't think that's the role of art. What the role of art is to raise awareness among the general public, who will then put pressure on politicians. Politicians will respond to pressure. They won't respond to an art show. They won't necessarily respond to doing the right thing. But if enough people learn about things and say, hey, I didn't know violence against women was such a major issue, yeah, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to write my senator. And then at some point, you will see a tipping point.
Okay, so what are the can't miss, don't miss moments in the festival as far as you're concerned?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's when people are really out there talking about what's most passionate. We have a anti-violence against women conference from 10 to 1 on Saturday up in City Place Theater, where we have 8 women.
This is in Silver Spring.
In Silver Spring, Maryland. City Place Mall, and we have a map on our website which will tell you, locate everything right near the metro. These women all suffered abuse and have transformed that pain into positive energy, working for the public good, and they're all going to tell their stories and talk about it. We have on Sunday at 12:30 Muslim Women Speak, which is 5 or 6 Muslim women just talking about what it means to be a Muslim woman in this culture, as well as going back and forth to their own traditional cultures. Because bridging gaps often involves just someone telling their story in an honest way.
But is that art?
Well, you know, it's advocacy. It's interesting you say, is it art? Any kind of outreach, you know, I've expanded the conception of what art is, but this is outreach. It is spoken word art. It is telling stories. It is narrative. So in a general sense, and yes, I have made those kind of decisions on my own, yeah, it is an expression, a human expression.
Will this cost people when they come? Is there an admission fee?
There is 0 admission fee. There's no ticketing. There's no permitting. It is all free. You walk in, you sit down and enjoy the music. We have a major 500-seat theater at Montgomery College that will be running programming full time. We have 2 movie theaters. We have restaurant venues, Pyramid Atlantic. So we have this kind of event, again, unprecedented. And I think, you know, we're inviting people into our homes, the artists. Come on in. We want to share this with you. It's our passion. And I didn't want to charge, and the artists felt it was important enough not to ask for money themselves.
Yeah. Many thanks to Tom Bloc of the Human Rights Art Festival for previewing this major event. Best of luck with it.
Thank you.
To learn more about the Human Rights Art Festival, visit humanrightsartfestival.com. I'm Mark Cohen, and this has been The Artistic Eye.
Layers on layers piled up on you. Layers on layers. How can I get to you? I'm searching, I'm digging, I'm praying, I'm singing. Oh, but when will I find you? I see a hidden identity. I hear a cry unheard. I feel the joy of laughter cut down by voice and a stare. It's a long journey with hidden treasures on the way. A tall cliff, a deep cavern, I won't let them get in my way. I'm standing alone on the earth, nothing I own. Close to sky, the stars, the sound. I'm near the heart of underground, and there's layers on layers piled up on you. Layers on layers. How can I get to you? I'm searching, I'm digging, I'm praying, I'm singing. Oh, but when will I find you? fear of being lost, but hear an inner voice that sees and accepts myself, releasing a controlling force. Layers on layers, piled up on new. Layers on layers, how can I get to you? I'm searching, I'm digging, I'm praying, I'm singing, oh, but when will when will I find you? When will I find you?
There we go. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Coffee House. Welcome, Lynn.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
The song that you opened with, I'm going to guess it was called Layers.
Yes, yes.
I was listening.
Okay.
So, how old is that song? How long ago?
Actually, that is an older song I wrote many, many years ago, and it was kind of an afterthought to put it on this recording, and then now it's become, I believe, the title cut at this point, unless something major changes.
This is a new recording coming out. Obviously.
Yes, this will be my first solo recording.
Excellent. What are you going to take us out with? What song?
I'd like to play a song that I wrote recently, probably the most recent song, last August when my daughter turned 13, kind of a coming of age time, changes in our family. Yeah,
your life's going to get really crazy now, right?
So I'm just going to, I'd like to do that. It's called 13 Summer Moons.
Excellent. Take it away.
Moons, 13 summers gone, 13's come so soon. No more a little girl, you're going through the changes, and time is left behind. Everything is rearranging, this green-eyed girl of mine. That August morning, the woods were keeping time when we first held you, your little hand in mine. Then all our lives were changing, and time had started new, and we were rearranging together now with you. So much to tell you, so much ahead to see. You're drifting, drifting further, yet still a part of me. And as you front the changes, like phases of the moon, wandering, waning, rearranging, dreaming of all you do. You're rising higher, like this moon tonight. Your light is shining, it's shining clear and bright. 13 summers gone, 13's come so soon. No more a little girl. You're going through the changes, and time is left behind. Everything is rearranging. This green-eyed girl of mine, this girl of mine, this girl of mine.